So these last few weeks we've been discussing that whole issue of the Vilna Gaon and sunset and when the fast is over. And so last week's shir was, I don't know, more than an hour long. We went through all the sources and why I believe what I believe. I made my arguments. I presented in short some other arguments that I saw against what I was trying to say. And by the way, I think it's quite reasonable to come to conclusions other than the ones I have concluded. And it could very well be that I'm wrong, but I have to be honest to what I believe. So I was asked to sum it up if I could. So here it goes. We'll try to do this in under 10 minutes. According to the Vilna Gaon, sunset is sunset. That's a given that he emphasizes that. And that's also what you get from the Rambam. Although, by the way, there is room already in the Tanaim and in the Yerushalmi to see that perhaps sunset isn't sunset. So when Rabbeinu Tam goes and says halachic sunset is practically an hour after the actual sunset, that's not so radical. Okay, there already is a basis for saying sunset. Halachic sunset is not sunset, and sunset is sunset. Beinash Mashot starts immediately thereafter, persists for 3/4 of a mile walk, whatever that is, and concludes with nightfall. He thus holds like Rabbah over Rav Yosef. Why? Because Rav Yosef said 2/3 of a mile walk, and Rabbah says 3/4, and Rabbi Yehuda over Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi has this instant Ben Hashmashos thing, and also says it's sometime after Rabbi Yehuda's, perhaps right next to it. According to Tosfos, it's a little bit after, a significant time, but not much after Rabbi Yehuda's. Rabbi Yehuda's nightfall, and then comes Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashot. Does Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashot even start with sunset? And Rabbi Yossi says sunset, like Rabbi Yehuda, but then Ben Hashmashot is sometime later. He disconnects the two. Okay, let's argue it. The Vilna Gaon rejects Tosfos's whole, and there's a little bit of time between the two, between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. And like the Rambam, there's Maimonides, the Vilna Gaon believe that halachic decisions must take sides between major opinions, some of which are rejected from consideration. That is, he doesn't hold like, let's say, the Mishnah Berurah, oh, there's opinions, that we have to worry, we have to choshesh, we have to incorporate every opinion in whatever practical, I guess, policy we take. Here, please plug this in. Thanks. I just want to jump into the picture, directly into the power, and that should do it. Next. Regarding the sage's explicit command to light the Hanukkah candles at sunset, in Bar-Hayim Mark 672, the Vilna Gaon mentions that even though there are Rishonim who discuss multiple halachic sunsets, the Ikar is the one known as the first or beginning of sunset, that is actual sunset. He uses terminology to use beginning of sunset, end of sunset, second sunset. That's all Rabbeinu Tam and the likes opinions, but he refers to the main one, the actual sunset, and mentions that similar confusion exists regarding the sage's explicit rule that fast days end at sunset. He connects the two. Says Hanukkah, just like the end of the fast days, they're both sunset in the Talmud, and we're looking for actual sunset. Lest one doubt the Vilna Gaon's intentions, Ma'aser Rav, I think Mark 235, 236, and 237 talk about the Vilna Gaon's actual practice lighting the Hanukkah candles. He doesn't say you could read this Vilna Gaon in 672. Or Bar-Hayim 672 and say, does Vilna Gaon actually say you should light your Hanukkah candles right at sunset? Is that what he's getting at? And the answer is 100% yes, because it says that his own personal practice was to light right at sunset, and that he even let Shabbos out early as possible, as early as halachically possible, much earlier than we do. Remember, he's in Vilna. Vilna, the Ben Hashmashos, as he himself wrote, lasts longer than it would, let's say, here in Eretz Yisrael. And it says that he would try to light his Hanukkah candles within half an hour of sunset. Now, here in Eretz Yisrael, we have a minhag that we let out Shabbos 35 minutes after Shabbos is out. That's a public policy decision. That's a lot more than necessary. But you see that the Vilna Gaon basically held that you had to light Hanukkah candles as soon as possible after sunset, so he let out Shabbos as soon as possible. Regarding fast days, Bar-Hayim 562 makes the contradictory, imprecise, and inaccurate. Why do I say that? Because he says that any fast on which the sun has not set, that's a quote of Rav Chisda from the Gemara, that is, on which one has not fasted until nightfall is not a fast. Okay? Maybe it's not Rav Chisda. I get confused. He's the one who says about Mekabel Tainus. So the Torah attributes both to Rav Chisda. So it says one is which the sun has not set. There's one in which one has not fasted until nightfall. So why is it contradictory? Because in one breath he says sun is not set, and then he says nightfall. And it's imprecise because precision means a precise time. And sunset to nightfall is actually quite a long time, at least according to most opinions. And it's inaccurate because it is not what the Talmud says. The Talmud says on which the sun has not set, and they're adding the words nightfall. So that's why I use those three words to describe what the Shulchan Aruch says, but he's not the first one to make such a statement. Well, he doesn't hold like Rabbi Yossi necessarily, the Chumrah. He explains himself earlier. We saw that 2 weeks ago, so we'll skip that. Okay, which the Vilna Gaon attributes to two main fallacious arguments, both of which he explicitly rejected elsewhere. Okay, the psak of the Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim 562 is attributed to two fallacious arguments that the Vilna Gaon rejects. He rejected out of hand all over the place. The Talmud only mentioned sunset regarding when the fast ends, but the Shulchan Aruch uses Rabbeinu Tam's halachic standard of sunset, which leads us to ending the fast much later than the actual sunset, or Chumra Lishma, stringency for the sake of stringency, as brought explicitly by the Tosafos. What I mean by Chumra Lishma, because if you say Rabbeinu Tam is correct, so sunset is 58 minutes after sunset, halachic sunset, and you don't really know how to figure that out, so you just add a few more minutes until it's actual halachic nightfall. So you have to wait until nightfall for the fast end. That's the Beis Yosef's opinion. And that means, so he poskin, the sun has to set and it has to be nightfall for your fast to be over. And that's why they held nightfall forevermore. And even though they went back to holding the Gaon's opinion of nightfall, they didn't correct, they're using the Rabbeinu Tam's conclusion, the Shulchan Aruch's conclusion, nightfall, but they're not using their definition nightfall. So it's nishtahein, nishtaher. That was my complaint against the calendar makers. They don't know what they're doing. But here, the Tosafists say two arguments, either because Rabbeinu Tam is correct and we don't know how to do Rabbeinu Tam, so you just go further, or Chumra Lishma. Why? Which is, Ben Hashmashos is a time of suffix. It's suffix Yom, suffix Laila. So even though it's just a fast day, you know what? Don't bring yourself into a suffix. Okay? We do not bring ourselves into a suffix, so be machmir anyways. You can do that all over the place. But normally we don't have to. The Talmud, the Chazal, didn't ask of us whenever you have a doubt, just go with the Chumrah. Although this is pre-shadowing something that Rav Shechter had mentioned. What? You find among Hasidic Ashkenaz, they're still machmir for everything they could be in 6 places or so, and then the Mishnah Berurah is machmir for every opinion all over the place on every single page. Okay, just do the more machmir opinion, But what happened to the Rabbanans and other rules? So that's their rule. Just be machmir. I said I called that Chumra Lishma. Further, the sages explicitly told us that Tisha B'Av is different from the other fast days, and that its banish mashod is still part of the fast. And it's not talking about the beginning of the fast, the banish mashod at the beginning of Tisha B'Av, because other fasts don't start at night at all. The time between dawn and sunrise is not considered banish mashod as suffix yom. We hold once dawn hits, it's 100% day. Oh yes, you can't put on your talis to film. Those mitzvahs start at Misha Yakir, but technically speaking, Kriyas Shema, prayer, Milah, saying Halil, sounding the shofar, all the mitzvahs of day start at dawn. Dawn means to start a day 100% according to halacha. But B'nai Shmashos at night, at the start of the night, that's a suffix. And when it says that Tisha B'Av, the B'nai Shmashos of Tisha B'Av is still usher to eat, it must be talking about the end of Tisha B'Av. And the fact that it says that about Tisha B'Av means that the other fasts, it's mutter to eat during the B'nai Shmashos already, because they end at sunset. That's the second Talmudic source that fast days end at sunset. So that's the Vilna Gaon in 562. 2 places already. The Vilna Gaon makes it very clear from what he's saying. Even though there are other opinions, the fast ends at sunset. Then we get into the problem of this. But first, I have to also say the issues of Hanukkah and fast days, Hanukkah candles, are in rabbinic enactment. So you can understand why we could be makel, why we could be lenient on these things. By Talmudic standards, doubts that arise concerning rabbinic law are to be resolved leniently, or the Rabbanon Lakula, suffix Rabbanon Lakula. So these are rabbinic laws, what time your fast day ends. Because the Torah didn't give us any fast days. There's only one fast day from the Torah, and that is what? Yom Kippur. But Yom Kippur, we wouldn't have this question if B'nai Shmashot is usher. Why? Yom Kippur, we have a mitzvah and an obligation, not only to start Yom Kippur while it is yet day. While it is yet day on the 9th, you have to make sure to continue Yom Kippur into the night of the 11th. Well, you could only stop Yom Kippur when it's certainly the 11th. Tosefes Yom Kippur is an obligation according to all opinions. It's the source for the idea that you could have Tosefes Shabbos. And then you get into the machlokes: is Tosefes Shabbos an obligation or just a mitzvah? So you can't. The entire idea of a fast day that's not Yom Kippur is entirely rabbinic legislation. Next, Yoreh Day 266. Now we're going to get into the problems that I had. Okay, the Vilna Gaon addresses the biblical issue of a child born during B'nai Shmashot whose circumcision on the 8th day cannot override the Sabbath. Okay, why? Because he's a suffix child. Normally, if the child is definitely born on Shabbos, so he's to be circumcised the next Shabbos, the 8th day. But if he's born at a time that's suffix Shabbos, he can't be circumcised on Shabbos. Even if it's Shabbos might be the 8th day or already his 9th day, You could circumcise a child on the 9th day. You can't circumcise on the 7th. No, because it's a suffix, you can't circumcise them. Only the children who definitely need to be circumcised on Shabbos are circumcised on Shabbos. Another biblical commandment. So now we're talking about Doraisas. And there he discusses the various competing opinions among the sages about when Banish Mashot is, because all of them need to be taken into account in this case. Because we're dealing with the Oraisa and a suffix, the time that Chazal says is inherently suffix, right? Because we're talking about Banish Mashot, a child born to Banish Mashot, and we're talking about a Doraisa. If this Doraisa overrides that Doraisa, we're talking about Chil Shabbos here. So now we have to be machmir for various opinions and the suffix and the various opinions about when that suffix is. He also mentions a strange contradiction that even though Hanukkah candles and the end of fast days are explicitly connected to sunset, he says that the Talmud explicitly connects both mitzvahs to sunset. For Hanukkah candles, a simple understanding of Rabbi Yehuda is utilized in practice, that is, light the Hanukkah candles at sunset. And that is also what Rav Chisda meant when he implied that fast is over at sunset. But the practice at the end of fast days is to follow a possible implication of Rabbi Yochanan's statement on Shabbos 35a, where Rabbi Yochanan says, we're machmir for Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. What? We have to start Shabbos when Rabbi Yehuda says the sun goes down, but we can only let the Kohanim be pure, Harif Shemesh, nightfall, according to Rabbi Yossi's opinion of nightfall, which is slightly after Rabbi Yehuda's opinion of nightfall. But Rabbi Yochanan's not talking about ending fast days. That might be an implication. If you apply Rabbi Yochanan's rule all over the place, they have to be machmir for Rabbi Yossi's opinion that his nightfalls and his sunset or whatever, his Banish Mashot is after Rabbi Yehuda's, so you suddenly have a chumrah all over the place. But why would the Vilna Gaon say this is something that only exists at fast days? And Rabbi Yochanan was only discussing two dinim, the start of Shabbos, and I guess Yom Tov and Yom Kippur because they're connected to Shabbos, and Hari of Shemesh, which is also a din d'oraisa. But it does not make sense to then extend Rabbi Yochanan's chumrah to what? To fast days, which are the Rabbanans. In Orach Chaim 261, the Shabbos Siman, the Vilna Gaon addresses the biblical issue of when Shabbos starts, biblical issue. And although he holds that sunset is sunset, and Banish Mashot starts immediately thereafter, persists for 3/4 of a mile walk, and concludes with nightfall, thus holding like Rabbi over Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda over Rabbi Yossi, like we said earlier, he says this very clearly. He discusses the various competing opinions among the sages about when Banish Mashot is, because all of them need to be taken into account in this case. The suffix start of Shabbos. And he's also explaining when you could do Tosefes Shabbos. If you want to know that when you definitely have to start Shabbos, be out of suffix because now you can't do malach anymore. And if you want to know when you could possibly add to Shabbos, you can't really add the suffix to Shabbos because what are you adding? Maybe you already supposed to take in Shabbos, be suffix. So whatever you add to Shabbos has to be what? Before or after the suffix time. Whatever you add to Shabbos, an Erev Shabbos has to be before suffix time. And whatever you want to add to Shabbos after Shabbos has to be after all the suffix times. That's why the Vilna Gaon introduces all these cases. Along the way, he emphasizes that sunset is sunset for a host of halachot. He says this very clearly, including ending fasts and what time Marav is and everything. He says mincha is over at sunset, and once it's sunset, according to the first opinion, you can't have mincha, and Marav is after sunset. That's the line between them. He introduced a new point. For those who hold like Rabbi Yochanan on Shabbos 35a, then fasts must last until nightfall. Somehow, he makes that jump. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, he says, you know what, we're machmir for Rabbi Yehuda. The sunset is sunset, l'chumra. So Shabbos has to start by Rabbi Yehuda's sunset, which is the first sunset. And you have to only let Kohanim eat their truma after Rabbi Yossi's nightfall. Okay, there are a number of responses to this. One, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's statement, even though it's brought in the Rif, is not followed by, for example, Rambam and Rashi. Rambam and Rashi implicitly reject what Rabbi Yochanan says here. Why? The Shabbos starts at sunset because Banish Mashot is already doubtfully the Sabbath day. And the priests only become pure after Banish Mashot is over because a verse explicitly says so, not because Rabbi Yochanan says we're machmir for it. Uva Shemesh with the hair, and that comes from the Sugya in Brachos 9. So Rambam makes this explicit also. He paskins this way. He mentions, here's why we wait until Ariv Shemesh for the Kohanim, not because Rabbi Yochanan said so as a chumrah. That's the first. You don't hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was discussing two biblical laws, the start of the Shabbos and when the purity sets in after immersion. Indeed, such should also thereby apply to biblical fasts, such as Yom Kippur, and other fasts that sages are established in the model of Yom Kippur, like Tisha B'Av, and the 10 ladder emergency fasts. Where are the 10 ladder emergency fasts? When you have an emergency, Batzores. It's not raining. By the way, this is a dry year, relatively speaking. Have you been to Eretz for a winter before? This is unusual. We should be having more rain. Why do I say should be? Because that's what God has promised us if we are behaving. And we don't behave, we don't get rain. So it's not the kind that Chazal would say, oh man, now we're going to, this is a real problem because there has been some rain. In some places got significant rain. I'm saying like around here in Jerusalem, we've gotten well below average. enough to survive, but it's not. The sages would say, you know what? It hasn't rained at all, Elio Navi style. So now we have to fast. But it says they first have Bahav, and the first groups of fasts are, day fasts, not including the night. And as the situation gets worse, they keep adding fasts. They add, 3 more, and then 7 more fasts. Okay, Bahav after Bahav until things improve. And those 10 latter fasts are just like Tisha B'Av. That means you can't do malacha on them, and they start miba od yom. That is, they start at night. They include the night. But for the early emergency fasts and the prophetic fasts commemorating the destruction of the first temple, the fasts that have names that we know about, that are not Tisha B'Av, no such stringency should be applied. And Rabbi Yochanan's statement, this is the third point, as we have and as initially explained with Vilna Gaon, means that when it comes to finding a standard for when Bein HaShmoshos ends, Rabbi Yochanan is talking about the end of Bein HaShmoshos. We use Rabbi Yossi's standards when Bein HaShmoshos ends. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Yossi says Bein HaShmoshos is over at this point, so you have to be machmir for the end point. Transferring this to fast, it means that although the fast is suspended at the start of Bein HaShmoshos, as we're going forward, we're looking for the beginning of Bein HaShmoshos to end the fast. A leniency, we must consider Rabbi Yossi's start of Bein HaShmoshos, a stringency, because we can't incorporate 2 leniencies simultaneously. However, this falls apart once the Vilna Gaon corrects the text to read that Rabbi Yochanan states that Rabbi Yehuda's standard of when Bein HaShmoshos ends has to be considered for assessing when the priest's purity sets in after immersion. Vilna Gaon says, I think there's a Toh Sofer there. It's not Rabbi Yossi that Rabbi Yochanan is talking about. It's Rabbi Yehuda. All Rabbi Yochanan is saying, be machmir for Rabbi Yehuda on both sides. You're machmir for Rabbi Yehuda's start of Bein HaShmoshos, and you're machmir for Rabbi Yehuda's end of Bein HaShmoshos. That means you have to start Shabbos when Bein HaShmoshos starts for Rabbi Yehuda, and the Kohanim only become purified when Rabbi Yehuda's Bein HaShmoshos is over at Seis. Transferring that to fasts, it means that the fast is suspended at the start of Bein HaShmoshos. That's what we're going for. And Rabbi Yehuda's standard is used, implying the fast ends at sunset. Okay? The only reason the fast ended later than Rabbi Yehuda's sunset is because you said we're gunning for Rabbi Yehuda's, Rabbi Yossi's beginning of sunset. Fast end at the beginning of sunset, at the beginning of Bein HaShmoshos at sunset, and Rabbi Yossi's sunset is after Rabbi Yehuda's Bein HaShmoshos is already over. But once you take Rabbi Yossi out of the equation, that's not what Rabbi Yochanan is saying at all. Rabbi Yochanan only mentions Rabbi Yehuda. So you look that up, and that makes a lot of sense. And the Vilna Gaon says explicitly, you have to correct the texts. Along the way, this is one of the consequences. Even if you're machmir for Rabbi Yochanan isn't saying what you think he says. That's only the Vilna Gaon could do a thing like this. The Vilna Gaon could say, take the white out and change a word in our text. He does that a few times based on all these kashas, because listening to Rabbi Yochanan's statement as we have it brings up all these contradictory points that somehow you can make this argument that a fast day should end much later than Chazal explicitly said it should end. Point 4, Rabbi Yochanan is simply not discussing fasts or any other halachot other than the ones he explicitly mentioned. Why do you extend Rabbi Yochanan to non-biblical fast days? He's talking about what he's talking about. When the sages allowed the leniency of not having to fast during Bein HaShmoshos, they assumed that those following this halacha consistently followed one Tana's definitions of the various times. Okay, when you say you don't have to fast during Bein HaShmoshos, you pick your Tana, your definition. You have to worry about all these different definitions. Therefore, the issue of employing a second leniency would be a non-factor. Saying that I have a leniency, I'm able to eat during Bein HaShmoshos, then they have to say, yeah, but you have to pick the most machmir Tana regarding when Bein HaShmoshos is. You don't have to pick and choose. You don't have to do that. You stick with your Tana through and through. We stick with Rabbi Yehuda's definition all the time. We don't suddenly have to worry about Rabbi Yossi's definition. It's rejected by the halacha. Holding like this broad application of Rabbi Yochanan's statement also introduced a number of halachic problems for the Vilna Gaon. Why does he allow the evening prayers immediately after sunset? If you have to be machmir for Rabbi Yochanan's opinion in fast days, you should be machmir for Ma'ariv also. No Ma'ariv before it's definitely Seis, because Bein HaShmoshos is a chumrah. It's a suffix. You have to be machmir. Yeah.
Until Plug Mincha.
After Plug Mincha, but we hold that way. I'm saying halacha, but that's only like the Rambam says. It's only on Erev Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos. Okay. Should not one therefore wait until nightfall for the evening prayer? Why did the Vilna Gaon not wait for nightfall in order to light his Hanukkah candles? Why did the Vilna Gaon say, you know what, the Talmud says, the time for lighting Hanukkah candles, sunset. The fast is over at sunset. But you know what, for the fast you have to be machmir. Why not Hanukkah candles? Okay, the answers are right in front of us. The Vilna Gaon assumed that ordinary fasts end at sundown, as per the basic understanding of 2 explicit Talmudic sources, and acknowledged that 13th century stringency to observe every fast until nightfall existed. By the way, the only first time we have this idea that all the fasts go into nightfall is from Rishonim from the 13th century, and they're all from Ashkenaz. Okay, no one ever had a Havamina in the Rambam's time. I doubt that even had a Havamina to do this. because it's so clear what from that. The only time a fast ends at nightfall is when the fast is comparable to other biblical laws that wait for nightfall, such as the fast of Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, and the 10 latter emergency fasts. This needs to be emphasized by the Vilna Gaon. Why? That those fasts end at nightfall, because you would have said that because the Gemara says clearly that fasts are over at sunset, you would have said that, oh, even Yom Kippur, even Tisha B'Av ends at sunset. Kamash Balan, no, some fasts you have to be machmir, and they have a suffix, they have a benish bashos, in which you cannot be, in which you still have to be fasting, and that is why he says this. So that brings that to conclusion. I don't think there's any questions coming in about this one, but this should be a nice upload, and we'll conclude it there. So, yes, I believe it's very clear from the Vilna Gaon. The fast is over at sunset, unless it's Tisha B'Av or unless it's Yom Kippur, and Chas v'Shalom, it should never happen again if we have one of those emergency fasts. Okay? It's like I wish people. Now I'd like to give a public service announcement. We're trying to raise money, of course, and pre-sell copies of the Haggadah Pesach in English. We're going to a second printing, thank God. There's a lot more demand this year. And like I said, our chances of offering Korban Pesach, the likelihood, it gets better every single year. And this year is the best chance we have at offering Korban Pesach we've had since the destruction of the Second Temple, or whenever it is they offered the last Korban Pesach in history. So you need this Haggadah, so you have to get it. There are still copies in Hebrew available, the original Hebrew edition, for those who can handle it. And I think that those who are qualified scholars should take that one. And also for our brethren in the diaspora who at least speak English and read English, we have an English edition. We're also creating a family edition. A lot less commentary and just a little bit more explanation. I said if you have your classic Art Scroll Haggadah, it has a lot of commentaries. And sometimes you get the Rosh Yeshiva Haggadah. My grandfather gave them, donated some money somewhere, and every year you get like a different Haggadah based on the teachings of some other Litvish Rosh Yeshiva. A lot of commentary there. So that was fun. And then Art Scroll just put out the family Haggadah, which doesn't have that much commentary, and it's like big print, and you can hold it, and they put them on with it's like a nice big size bencher. I like those ones for when I don't have Korban Pesach, so I don't intend to use those anymore. But we're preparing that. So if you want to help make it possible, I'm your address, and we appreciate that. Anybody who does help make the Haggadah possible will, of course, get a complimentary copy once they come out. So get ready for Pesach and get your Haggadah Pesach because you need it.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.